Can you see my screen?
Yes, Prabhu, we can see your screen.
Okay. Can you just confirm 1 sec? What do you see, Prabhuji? You see Dandavats, right?
Yeah.
I see a person doing Dandavat.
And that's all. Okay, Prabhuji.
Actually.
Okay, Prabhuji, let's start. My Dandavat Pranam to all devotees who've joined today's program, either directly in the Zoom or through Yahoo or through other means of Facebook, etc., or who would be watching this in future. Please accept my humble obeisances. With that, let's start today's so-called lecture, which will change the flavor as we go along. My name is Vijay Damodar Adhikari, and I'm a neophyte Vaishnava who's just started his Krishna conscious journey. So please, I seek your blessings. With that, let me begin. So we start with quick kirtan. As Srila Prabhupada used to start, so it's his favorite, so I'll start with the same. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jan Vallabha Girvardhari Jai Gopi Jan Vallabha Girvardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana
Yamunatira Vanachari
Yamunatira Vanachari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol,
Nitai
Nitai
Gaura Hari Bol.
Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura
Hari Bol.
Jai Panchtatva, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Jai, Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. So we'll start today with Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verses 41 and 43, 41 to 43. So all three verses combined. That is the topic for today. And we start with the Mangalachar prayers. Let's start with Srila Prabhupada mantra, Pranam mantra. Namah. And dear devotees, if you are initiated or if you are under shelter of a guru, please chant your guru's mantra in your mind. Then we'll chant Srila Prabhupada mantra, then we'll go on to Mangalacharan prayers. So I'll chant the Pranam mantra for my guru in my mind, and then we'll go on to Srila Prabhupada mantra. Namam Vishnu Padaya. You can chant with me or you can sing with me. No following. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Prabhupada. You go to Mangalachar prayers now. Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksharon Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padkamlam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajiva Sadhvaitam Savadutam Parjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vitaka Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagadapade Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrashvano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatrubhascha Kripa Siddhubheva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. And you can raise your hands and chant along. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And one more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So let's. So the modus operandi for today's so-called lecture is, it's not really a lecture. Consider it as a research associate who's trying to learn a subject in the presence of some senior devotees or other senior associates. So that is the modus operandi of today's delivery. And so we'll go through the three verses and then we'll go into analysis part for that. So let's start with the three verses. So this is verse number 341, and we won't have time to repeat, so yeah, you can just hear. Sorry. Tasmatvam indriyanadau. Actually, you can repeat if you want to, in your muted. Tasmatvam indriyanadau niyam bharatarashabha papmanam prajahayenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Synonyms. Tasmat, therefore, tvam, you, indriyani, senses, adho, in the beginning, niyamya, by regulating, bharatarashabha, O chief amongst the descendants of Bharata, papmanam, the great symbol of sin, Prajahi, Karm, he certainly, enam, this Gyan of knowledge, Vigyan, and scientific knowledge of the pure soul. It's a good combination, Gyan Vigyan. Nashnam, the destroyer. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Prabhupada ki jai. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Purport. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and a specific knowledge of the self. Gyan refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. Vigyan refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul's constitutional position and his relationship to the supreme soul. It is explained thus in Srimad Bhagavatam, Jnanam param guhyam me yad vigyan samanvitam sarahasyam tad angam cha grahan gaditam maya. The knowledge of the self and supreme self is very confidential and mysterious. But such knowledge and a specific realization can be understood if explained with their various aspects by the Lord himself. Bhagavad Gita gives us the general and specific knowledge of the self. The living entities are part and parcels of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. So let's just go into what does it exactly mean by part and parcels and where exactly is it mentioned. So Bhagavad Gita 15:7 mentions, Mame vancho jeev loke jeev bhuta sanatana manasastani indriyani prakatistani karshati. What does it mean? It says in translation, the living entities in the conditioned world, that is the material world, are my eternal fragmental parts. So they are eternal. That's point number one. And they're fragmented. So they're kind of disjoint. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with six senses, which include the mind. So what are these six senses? One is the mind, other are the Gyanendriyas, the eyes, ear, nose, tongue, all of those. Okay, so let's continue the 341. So we stopped at the parcels. So continue reading. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. Next para. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So from any stage of life, or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest perfectional stage of human life. So here it is mentioned that this is a perverted reflection. So where does this fact come from? Let's check Bhagavad Gita. If you look at Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, the very first verse, Krishna mentions, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Urdham Moolam Adha Shakham, Ashwatham Prahur Avyam, Chandamsi Yas Pranani Yastam Vedsa Vedvit. So Krishna is saying, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna is saying, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So the part of reflection is mentioned here. There's no ready experience in the social. Prabhupada says there's no ready experience in the world of a tree situated upside down. However, that tree can be found besides a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank of the water reflect with their branches down and roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual is situated on desire. So one key point to note, the reflection in this world is based on desire. Just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in the reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off the relationship with it. So let's continue 3.41. So that was the end of 3.41. Let's go on to the next verse, 3.42. So next sequel, the verse reads like this. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manah manasastu para buddhir. So yo buddhe paratastu sa synonyms. Indriyani, senses, parani, superior, ahu are said. Indriya, more than the senses. Param, superior, mana, the mind. Manasa, more than the mind. Two, also para, superior, buddhi, intelligence. So three, part A, part B, part C, as they are called, lines mentioned superiority aspects. Yeah, who buddhe, more than the intelligence, parta, superior to, but sa, he. This sa, he is a little cryptic, but we'll get to know in translation by his divine grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. So one curious aspect to note over here is that the working senses, karmendriyas are mentioned and not gyanendriyas. So that's one aspect over here. Purport. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. So that is the answer. Because we are talking about outlets. So there are two types of, or two lots of indriyas or senses. One is the one that take in information. Eyes, ears, nose, the one that we talked about earlier. And these are the ones from which information goes out, or you interact with the world outside. So from us to them, and those are the working senses. Okay. So because these outlets are, senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. So we're talking in respect to lust, and that is why this is mentioned. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions as described here ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. So in the case of dreaming, swapna, they call three dimensions of existence, right? So Jagrat, swapna, sushupti, waking up, dreaming state, one is lying down sleeping, but it's a dreamy state. And then when it's a dreamless state, it's called sushupti. And so one curious thing to note over there, and it's a segue, is that when we talk about with impulse list, they invariably talk about these three states, but in a reverse order of hierarchy. So in Krishna consciousness, we call the Jagrat state as the one with the most consciousness. And it is mentioned in a verse before this in chapter 3, where the consciousness is being described about the embryo, of the baby in the embryo, of a fire with smoke coming out, fire barely visible. So the impulse list will talk about Sushupti, the one in which the state of unconsciousness, or they call it super consciousness, with is non-dreaming state. They say that is the highest stage. So wakefulness is mostly ignorance, and then after that, the one in Swapna is better, and then the one in Sushupti is the best. And out of all of these three, that is like a Sattva stage. And then after that comes Turiya. Turiya is the fourth, the transcendental stage. Now, curiously, Vaishnavas describe it the other way around. They say that Sushupti, the one in the dreamless state, is the one with the most ignorance, because you're neither conscious of your mana, vacha, kaya, all three things, mind, body, words. You can't use any of them, right? Whereas at least in the Swapna dreaming stage, you're not using your body, but at least you're using your mind. You're not using your speech. So, but at least the mind is getting used. So reverse order. And there is further proof about it, but it was a segue. So I just want to tell you, because this dreaming aspect is very curious of how it is dealt with first list versus impulse list. Anyway, let's continue. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence, and above intelligence is the soul proper. If therefore the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all of the subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. So the way these exist is, there's like a shell in the heart region, and they are all combinedly called heart. The soul, then as Krishna mentioned, there's the aham, false ego, then intelligence, then the mind, senses, prana, physical body. So that it's like onion rings. Not that we should talk too much about onion, but that's one easy way to, or concentric circles. Anyway, let's continue. In the Katha Upanishad, there's a similar passage which is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If therefore the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there's no chance that the senses will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained, param drashtva nivartate. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there's no chance of it being engaged in the lower propensities. So this thing about param drashtva nivartate is coming from Bhagavad Gita 259. Vishaya vinivartante nihara rasya dehina rasavarjam rasopi yasya param drashtva nivartate. What it says basically is, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense object remains. For example, if someone is addicted to take drugs or smoking, and they kind of go on fasting, won't have drugs or won't have this, or even people who are not taking food, after some time that craving comes back with a lot more force. So that's what we mentioned over there. Taste for sense object remains. But seizing such engagements may experience a higher taste. So that is one clue to today's talk, is that a higher taste is necessary to get rid of anything, and you can't just shun it or stop it. So anyway, let's go on. So we did till param drashtva nivartate. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is a solution of the whole problem. So what is the constitutional position? In fact, what is constitution? Constitution obviously means what things are made up of, right? But we obviously have the constitution for the government. That is where everything's written in terms of what are the guidelines based on which the government should be acting, right? In this case, though, constitutional position means what is the basic aspect about the soul, ajiva. So with intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of the senses. But aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. So this aspect about the constitutional position is given in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 20, 108, 109. Jivera Swarupaya Krishnara Nityadas. Krishnera Tatastha Sakti Bheda Prakash. Suryamsha Kiranaya Che Agni Jwala Chaya Swabhavika Krishnera Tina Prakar Shakti Haya. So what it is talking about is, it is the living entity's constitutional position to be an eternal servant of Krishna. For example, if you talk to someone and ask them, hey, what do you think is your real duty, or what do you really want to do, and what you should be doing, right? So they might act in different capacities or their own mental consciousness, or at given time, place, and circumstance, sabekal paristiti, they might say different answers. My duty is to be, I'm a dad or whatever, and I have to take care of my family. Someone might say, oh, actually, I'm the VP of blah, blah company, and I have to take care of my organization, line of business, get it to profitability. A mayor, a president might say something similar, but a little different, right? But if you go down more core and core and core, right? So if you say, hey, but is that it? I mean, if you ask them, then they'll probably go down to some more core feelings or more core thought processes within them, right? And when it goes down to very, very core, when people really gone meditative and they really introspect themselves, who am I? What am I doing in this world? What is this world? What is my duty over here? Is there a God? What are these other people doing? Are they same as me, etc., etc., right? So when they go into that, then they figure out that I am essentially a soul. And at that point of time, a lot of people stop. However, in Krishna consciousness, we don't stop there because we know something more fundamental. That's all glories to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna's incarnation in Kali Yuga, who actually very clearly specified and clarified the constitutional position of the entity, and which is this line, famous line, Jivera Swarupaya. Jiv means entity, Swarup is constitutional position, is form. Swarup, Swa means same, Rup, form, Haya is Krishnera Nityadas. It is a Nityadas. Das means servant of Krishna, Nitya, eternal. So that is why we came over here. Let's go back. Yeah, we were over here. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness, by complete surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna and Krishna consciousness, there's every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. So this is not very, maybe a little scope is left over here. If the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, then how is it possible for the mind to become agitated? Because master should really control his servant, right? Is it saying that the servant is more powerful? So This agitated mind is being expressed by Arjuna when he's talking to Krishna. When Krishna has given him the Dhyana Yoga, the Kundalini rising, and all of the Ashtanga Yoga, and all of those things, saying sit in a corner and do all of those tapasya, meditation. So Arjuna says, oh, Krishna, I can do it. And the way he says that is through this 634. Arjuna says, Chan chalam hi mana Krishna, pramati balvat dridam, tasyaham nigraham manye, vayor iv sudushkaram. What it means is, Arjuna is just relenting to the fact that the mind is restless, is turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. So that is what it means by agitated. Oh Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So with that, we have ended the second verse. Let's go to the last verse. It's a smaller verse, 43. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam sadamims. Evam, thus, buddhe, to intelligence, param, superior, buddhva, knowing, samstabhya, by studying, atmanam, the mind, atmana, by deliberate intelligence, jahi, conquer, shatrum, the enemy, mahabaho, O mighty armed one, kamrupam, in the form of lust, durasadam, formidable. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Srila Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence. So, previous verse talked about these three and hierarchy, and now he's talking about something transcendental, one that crosses all of these. O mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Purport. This third chapter of Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a very clear, direct, and very stark statement from Prabhupada. Because if you look at it, it doesn't really seem that there's any Krishna conscious aspect of it, right? All it is saying is use your deliberate spiritual intelligence and therefore conquer lust. And this looks like something that's like an add-on. But that really is the crux, as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning over his conclusive directive. So how is it? Let's continue reading. Without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. So this is where we talked about the param dashtani vartate. One may not give up the work for prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind. So all the six senses. By steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. So that means going towards the constitutional position. So it's a kind of a repeat. This is the sum total of this chapter. The third chapter. What is this third chapter? It's Karma Yoga. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purpose to third chapter Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Karma Yoga or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. So with that, we end the first section of our conversation today, and let's go on to the next one. So we'll oh sorry, I'm not sharing. My bad. So far we read the three verses. We kind of went a little bit outside the scope of what is written in Bhagavad Gita as it is. But let's do the analysis now. As a research associate, which is the modus operandi for our today's so-called lecture, really a talk. Sorry. All right. So we are on. Yeah. So let's revisit those three verses and just a translation. Text 41 says, therefore, Arjuna, best of Brahma, in the very beginning, to note the words, very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin lust by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer knowledge and self-realization. So the key aspects or the dimensions, as they call it, data warehousing, if you really want to get dimensions of the data over here, right? Although it's unstructured data. Firstly, in the very beginning, why is it saying very beginning? What does it mean by very beginning? Is it very beginning of Jiva's life when they fell down from Vaikuntha onto this material world? Or is it the very beginning of this life when they're born as human beings? Or is it something else? So this is not clarified, but I think that in this case, it means in the very beginning means whenever Jiva turns towards spirituality at that point of time. So that's one aspect to note. Second aspect to note over here is that it is talking about curbing this great symbol of sin lust. The word curb is very stark. It is conspicuous because it talks about to what extent one should be going, right? And how should we one doing it? By regulating the senses. So this is the verb, and this is the destination. So this is the occasion, when to do it, how to do it, by regulating the senses, and what is the end objective, from where to go where. And then what should happen? This should slay the destroyer of knowledge. So lust is described as slayer of knowledge and self-realization. Okay. Now the text 42 is just a hierarchy. Working senses superior dull matter. Mind is higher than senses. Intelligence, mind and soul is higher, right? So it is concentric circles we talked about. But let's go on to the text number 43. Thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses by intelligence. That is all of the subtle body. So we have basically categorization of these onion rings are gross body, which dies, and the subtle body. In the subtle body is the senses, mind, intelligence, often easily called as heart. The one knowing oneself is the soul, right? Oh mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind. So what is by deliberate spiritual intelligence? So how to do and what to do? You should study the mind. Looks like that is the objective by deliberate spiritual intelligence. But hold on, there's more. Krishna conscious, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So studying the mind is an interim destination. The eventual destination is conquering the insatiable enemy known as lust. So in the first, if you compare this one and this one, 41 and 43, over here we were slaying the destroyer or curbing this lust. In this case, we are conquering the lust. Okay, so that's one comparison or one aspect that stands out. And the other thing is, mind is really an interim object of activation. Really, it is the spiritual intelligence, or rather intelligence which is spiritualized through the means of Krishna consciousness. That is the deliverer. How to do? By spiritualizing your intelligence. What to do? It should be mentioned over here. Conquer this lust. And when to do? That is not mentioned, but we can decode from here because this is very beginning. You can probably guess that this is later, right? So those are the aspects that come out of this verses. So go back there and let's look at this. The term that I talked about, curbing and conquering. Why are they mentioned over here? And here's a graphic that talks about prevention and cure. So 3.41 is talking about curbing something. When you curb something, it can spring back, right? If you slay something, it can be reborn. But when you conquer something, you don't allow it to get out of your grip. So two different things. One is like a prevention, and one is more like a cure. So if that is the case, from our traditional knowledge of English or whatever we heard in Proverbs and things like that, we always heard prevention is better than cure. And if that is the case, why would Krishna even talk about 3.43? 3.41 was enough. You curb lust, and prevention is better than cure. You don't need a cure, and you're done. Well, the reality is that this proverb, prevention is better. Actually, at this point of time, I would like to open the floor and ask someone if, dear devotees, if you have any insights into why, though from traditional knowledge we know prevention is better than cure. In this case, Krishna is talking both about prevention as well as about cure. Why? And maybe this is the graphic that says that both prevention and cure are being discussed over here. And it is Krishna is not following the traditional wisdom saying prevention is better than cure. So why even worry about cure? Let's focus on prevention. Yeah, Mataji, please unmute yourself and you can say. Lakshya Mataji.
Oh, Hare Krishna,
Oh,
Prabhuji.
Lakshya. Oh, okay. Hey, Lakshya. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I think he's saying both because he wants us to prevent it first, and then if it like comes back, then you also have a cure for it.
Good thought, but in that case, why not go for cure then? In that case,
Oh.
why have prevention?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, cure would take care of both prevention and cure aspect, right? So we'll get to it. I think it will come later. But in this case, the point to note is both prevention and cure are being mentioned, right? Okay. But one thing that we did get out of both these three verses combined, especially 41 and 43, is the objective of the activity or the target is lust, both over here as well as over here, right? So in general, one thing that we get out of these three verses are, and thanks Laksh for that, is that the general direction, and this is the Marina's compass, that's how they create direction, is that the verses are talking about overcoming lust. And that really is our topic, the second part of our topic, right? One is to read the verses, understand them, and then see how to overcome lust. So that is what is coming out as the conspicuous 30,000, 50,000 feet view. And let's see what do we do about them. So. Yeah, okay. So if you look at this 43 verse, right, this is talking about spiritual intelligence. What does spiritual intelligence mean? If you think about it, in the chapter number 2 on Bhagavad Gita, a very similar term actually exists and very close to it. It's called Buddhi Yoga. And Buddhi, intelligence, and yoga means one that connects it, right? That's yoga means adding two things together or connecting it to the reality, or you can draw your line wherever you are, depending if you're persist or impersist, connecting your to universal cosmos, Brahman, energy, nirvana, moksha, liberation, or connecting it to even higher self, which is Krishna. So the personal aspect of God, right? So in this, this is Bhagavad Gita Advanced View, chapter number 2. And over here, let me just search for the word Buddhi and see how Buddhi Yoga will tie to this. So this is the first occurrence of the term Buddhi Yoga. And why is Buddhi Yoga is something that we are discussing now? Because this is, by the way, starts at verse number 39. So and let's just read the first time it occurs. Yeah. Arjuna has already accepted Krishna as the spiritual master by surrendering himself unto him. Consequently, Krishna will now tell him about the working process of Buddhi Yoga or Karma Yoga. So, in other words, the practice of devotional service only for the sense gratification of the Lord. So here's one of the meanings that are being let out. This Buddhi Yoga is clearly explained later. Okay. One who is therefore situated in devotional or transcendental loving service to the Lord, or in other words, in Krishna consciousness, attains to the stage of Buddhi Yoga by the special grace of the Lord. Let's search a little more onto Buddhi Yoga. Krishna made an analytical description of the soul just to bring Arjuna to the point of Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. So in chapter number 2, where Krishna is talking about you're not body, your soul, there was a Sankhya-based or analytical description of the soul, right? What are the constituents of this entire material world? All those Gyanendriya, Karmendriya, the senses, and then the mind, intelligence, body, all of those things that we kind of discussed, and a lot more than that, right? How did it all start from? They started from Pradhan, and Mahatattva came out, and from that, the mode of goodness, and all the three modes came out. So the entire creational aspects which are represented into the constituents of the material world are being mentioned. That's the Sankhya, right? And it ends up with 28 elements, which is the soul and the super soul, Krishna, personality of God, right? So, but the reason that Krishna mentioned it is because Krishna wanted to put these building blocks together so that he can bring Arjuna to the point of Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. So this is a conspicuous aspect, and that is the reason we are talking about this today. Not only does 3.43 talks about spiritual intelligence, which is very close to Buddhi Yoga, but the conspicuous aspect is, and this is where people don't even like Srila Prabhupada. Why? Because he mentioned, he translates Buddhi Yoga as Bhakti Yoga. And people are not into Bhakti. They kind of detest. They're saying that, how come that Srila Prabhupada always turns everything into Bhakti? And the answer is, someone asked Srila Prabhupada that, and Srila Prabhupada replied back saying that just like you don't, you run away from the personal aspect of God or Bhakti, similarly, for me to make sure that you don't do that, I kind of mention Bhakti at every point of time where I get an opportunity. So among the first terms, probably the most conspicuous terms in the entire Bhagavad Gita, that people outside Bhakti circles detest or dislike, is this term, Buddhi Yoga, being translated into Bhakti Yoga. And not for no reasons, because Srila Prabhupada, or rather the Parampara, is very clearly defined that when the Buddhi, instead of going outwards, the chariot vision that we have, right? The horses, and then the senses are the reins, and the mind is the driver, and the intelligence, the driver, mind is the reins, and the soul is sitting there, right? So that is going outwards towards the material world. And how, when you turn it around and the soul starts looking towards super soul, the second bird that is sitting in our heart, right? Two birds are there in everyone's heart. One is the soul, Jivatma, and then the other is the Paramatma, the super soul. So at that point of time, the Buddhi that is going out and trying to enjoy the material world suddenly becomes spiritualized, or rather not suddenly, but through the transformation becomes spiritualized. And therefore, there is no difference between Buddhi Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, actually, at least in the eventual aspect of things. And because Srila Prabhupada and the entire Parampara, and obviously Krishna, is asking us to go there, therefore, Buddhi Yoga has been translated as Bhakti Yoga. So very closely mentioning this last verse about 343, where spiritual intelligence is the key to the cure. Regulating the senses is the key to prevention. Okay, so one more verse over here from, this is from chapter 12, verse number 8. And Mayyev mana adatsva mayi buddhim niveshaya niveshishyasi mayyeva at urdvam na samshaya. What is being mentioned here? Just fix your mind. So Krishna is in this chapter, Arjuna asks very point blank, saying, hey, which is better, impersonal, personal aspect? And in the sequence of giving that answer, Krishna lays down four very clear stages, or rather aspects of doing things in a hierarchical fashion. And this is the one which is, I think, the topmost one. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. So the reason I brought it out is because he's very clearly saying, engage your intelligence in me. Krishna is not saying, engage all your activities in me, your words, mind, logic, all of the. In one word, intelligence conceptualizes what is our ability to do, or what does our consciousness reflect. So, or how our consciousness shines out, intelligence kind of controls that or captures that. So intelligence is the aspect which is the reason I went over here. This is a very good sequence of verses, and I highly recommend for those who are not into it to please read this chapter, especially these verses 8, 9, 10, and 11, because they give a very clear hierarchy. We'll spend 5 seconds on this, and we'll jump over. He's over here, Krishna is saying, just fix your mind on me. And he says, if you cannot fix your mind on me, then follow regulative principles, or Abhyas Yoga, standard practices, regulative practices. If you cannot practice regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then try to work for me. This is called Krishna Karma Arpanam. That means you do what you like and offer the results to me. Over here, you are doing what Krishna likes, or rather Vedas say, whatever Krishna's paraphernalia of his org or his government is saying. So you're doing that, versus over here, you do what you like. I want to create a startup in the Bay Area, and I want to earn a lot of money, and I will open a great ISKCON temple. I'm very nice, I'm devotee. But it started off with my basic liking. So this is the third one. And the fourth one is, Krishna over here says, if however you're unable to work in this consciousness, then just try to give up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. The very conspicuous over here, there's no Krishna over here, and there is, or at least in the obvious form, and there is Krishna, work for me, follow my regulative principles, and put your mind onto me. So 3 stages hierarchically, where Krishna is involved. And if you cannot even work for Krishna, then you just become self-situated. So this one was the 10th verse, the 8th verse that we just used. And in this case, the intelligence was mentioned. Anyway, let's continue. So nutshell, this set of verses are talking about hierarchy, it talks about prevention and cure, and it also goes into spiritualizing your intelligence. And how with that, with one view, you can do, or you should do, Buddhi Yoga. So maybe this pic might be giving you a wrong conception of Buddha Yoga. Buddha Yoga means Buddha, I'm talking about Lord Buddha. So while this person looks like that, that's not the case. It is more like an eye into your inner world. Okay, so now that we've come to a conclusion that overcoming lust is the key for these 3 verses, which are the end verses for chapter 3, which is the Karma Yoga section, we have to look at why. So go back. Bhagavad Gita chapter 1, introduction to everyone. Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 is, and Krishna says, I don't want to fight, gives many reasons. Krishna counters all those reasons. And in the process of countering, when he's talking about that Sankhya Yoga, which we talked about, and then goes on to a little bit into Karma Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, some verses from Krishna confused Arjuna, because in some verses it was mentioned, go fight, go with determination. And in other verses it was mentioned, you can be detached from work and act. And the detachment was wrongly interpreted by Arjuna, or interpreted by Arjuna as unattached. So there's a difference between detached and unattached. Unattached means you don't do something. Detached means you do something, but mentally you are not attached to it, right? Or you're not attached to the fruit of results. Karma Yoga definition, standard definition. Anyway, so because the chapter 2 was given, and in the process of describing the chapter 2, that is when Krishna was mentioning, went down to Karma Yoga. So the point is, why does Krishna end chapter 3 with saying overcome lust? We didn't go into the rest of chapter 3, but chapter 3, in the process of describing Karma Yoga, actually comes to this last part. And before this, the second last part talks about that what are the various benefits of doing Karma Yoga. And at that point of time, the benefits are, it orients you from doing activity that you like the 4 verses that we said, to Krishna. So that is that is the biggest win in doing Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga transforms into Bhakti Yoga. Those verse number 11 that we just saw from the chapter 12 into number 10, 9, and 8. But why do it? I mean, why do we have to overcome lust? So that part still remains. And that is the last part, because lust is defined as something that is a problem in Karma Yoga. To what extent is it a problem? Let's see that. So that we know the result. We know our objective, overcoming lust, but why? So from Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, let's pick up this verse 62, this towards the end only. Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate. So what is the translation? While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. And it goes on to the next set of verse. It's 2 verse duos there. And from anger, complete delusion arises. From delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls on again into the material pool. So very, very key, it is affecting intelligence. So intelligence is an end is at the very end of the receiving side over here. And where does it start? It started from contemplation objects of the senses. So there's a graphic over here, and let's see if I can actually do a slideshow of that. I'm guessing it will not be visible for you. So let me please share my screen. And start actually. Sorry, technical glitch. Okay, so
Prabhu, you can maybe try to, I don't know if you through the chat, if you can send me the file, I will try.
can you see now?
I can see Vedabase.
See spiritual fall down?
Spiritual folder I can see, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, so that was it. So verse 262 is talking about astit pragya. Astit pragya is sthit means stationed, and pragya means intelligence. One who is steady, his intelligence steady, right? So this verse is 262, 63, which we just read, is talking about a person who is asthir pragya. That means his intelligence is not steady, unsteady intelligence. And what happens to what is the hashra, or the experience, or what happens to a person who is asthir, right? So they are meditating on the sense objects, right? So they are walking in their life, and they get attached to something, to these sense objects, rati develops. And from that, lust, kama develops. And then if the lust, whatever they're lusting for, I want a great car, I want to do a startup, I want to be the richest person in the world, whatever, I want the most beautiful woman, a man, whatever in the world. If that is successful, great. Then I lust more for something more. If that thing is not successful, that's give rise to frustration and anger. The anger, when it increases, leads to delusion, because when people get angry, they can't think properly, right? And then they are bewildered of memory. Point to note. And then there's loss of intelligence. So the loss of intelligence happens because of bewilderment of memory. That means intelligence is based on memory. So what's the basic differentiation between the functions of mind and intelligence? A segue over here is mind is like a processing engine, right? It receives inputs. It's a function that takes in parameters from outside, then it does some processing and gives an output, right? Some return type. Whereas intelligence is like a not a processing engine. It is your I would say an intelligent cache, right? It feeds off hard disk, it feeds off RAM, and it provides you information to enable the processing engine mind to be able to take the right actions. Though it doesn't happen like that in for conditioned people, that is the functioning or the basic function of how mind and intelligence is supposed to work hand in hand together. So intelligence is supposed to provide that information. And why is it not able to do it? In the case where lust happens, because the memory is gone, the connection to the hard disk, to RAM is gone, there is no information. And without information, intelligence is a dead duck, right? Intelligence is based on experience, and intelligence is based on your what has already happened, past experience. And if there's no memory, that means there is no history. Without history, how can you predict what is going to happen in future? So intelligence is not able to give that advice. And with that, people fall back to material pool, as this poor guy just fell down, right? So that is all that I wanted to show you over here. But a peculiar thing to note over here is meditating on sense objects is basically thinking. So our heart, this entire subtle body, which consists of mind, intelligence, and false ego, has a functioning which is thinking. So this is combined. At some point of time, when you think about something, then you get attached to it. When you get attached, rati develops. Then you have feeling developed for it. So there's a difference between thinking and feeling. At our work, you do basic thinking. You don't really necessarily develop attachment. You can, you may not, but that's where professionalism comes from. But at some point of time, now you want to desire. Remember that we were reading that opposite reflected tree. It is reflected in a pool of desire. That's the reflection of the Urdhmula Chakra, the banyan tree. So the willing is where lust exists. All three of them, meditating or thinking, attachment, feeling, lust, willing, all come from the heart. But there we can very clearly see thinking, feeling, and willing are definitely a hierarchy where things are not going west, right? And this is where karma is created. So long story short, the reason why Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3 is talking about trying to curb sense lust, not anger, curb not attachment, but focuses on lust is because karma gets created here. And karma is where you get into cycle of birth and death. That is what binds us. What are two things that binds us in this world? One is our karma. Second is our proclivity to create new karma. One is called kutam, one is prarabdha and aprarabdha, depending on if it's fructified or not. Right? So these are the two things that keep us in this world. So killing lust, conquering lust stops karma. You can think all your while, you can be attached all you want to things in this world. If you don't develop a lust for it, that means you desire it for yourself, then you won't create karma out of it. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Okay. Please pardon me as I share my screen. Right, so I hope you can see this.
Yes, Prabhu, we can say analysis.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you. So let's quickly jump onto where we were. So we were here. Okay. So as you can see, lust comes with a bigger package, which are called Shat Varga, right? And what are those Shat Varga? Lobha, Moh, Maya, it's not Maya, anger, greed, lust, all of those things. There are 6 brothers. They all come together, right? So we want to get rid of all of them, and lust is the base for that. Essentially, lust is an enemy, and that is the reason why Bhagavad Gita Karma Yoga focuses on that, to say, here is the enemy, watch out for that. Get rid of it, conquer it, curb it. Okay. Now comes the next part. So since we know our action plan is to conquer or curb it, how do you do it? Unless you know where your enemy exists, how can you conquer your enemy, right? So the first thing that in military, when they attack, right, they send a reconnaissance unit. It's not a battalion. The whole army doesn't go out. It's a small unit. It's a SWAT group that actually goes there and just figures out where things are, right? So what are the enemy bases, right? And once they figure that out, then they can develop the strategy accordingly. So as you can see, there's a yogi put in military dress, trying to figure out. And then let's see where Bhagavad Gita helps us for that. Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, number 40 says, the verses that were before our verses. We are running short of time, so I'll probably skip the translation. Sanskrit, just go to translation. The senses, mind, and intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders them. So far, we found out 3 places: senses, mind, and intelligence. However, Bhagavatam says one more thing. This is the situation where Parikshit Maharaj has gone out and he started feeling the effects of Kali Yuga just come up, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And then he finds a bull and a cow, and they are both in a sorry situation. And this is where personality of Kali, who is actually whipping that bull, and 3 of his legs are gone. So the personality of Kali asked, so then Parikshit Maharaj said, I'm going to kill you and whatever. And then he begs forgiveness, and Parikshit Maharaj gives him space or kindness because he's surrendering. And therefore, Kali says, okay, where will I live? And he mentions 4 places to live. And this is the 5th place, is that verse that talks about where Kali, the personality of Kali Yuga, has asked where they can live. The personality of Kali asked for something more. Because of his begging, the king gave him permission to live where there is gold. Because wherever there's gold, there's also falsity, intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. So there are how many places? 4 places. There is lust, existing as senses, mind, intelligence, and also wherever there's gold. And what does gold really mean? Gold is a standard. It's not just for earrings. It is that gold is the international standard, or the way of balancing or unifying the economies of the world. In Fort Knox, they have all these gold, and then whenever some country gives some money back to World Bank because they're taking a loan, and then some gold bars go from one cell to another cell. It's a big thing, but gold is the way the world really runs. I don't know if people talk about it very much now. Anyway, so bottom line is lust exists at every place in your subtle body and at the most important crucial places in the physical body, astral world, and both in physical world. Wherever there is opulence, wherever there is material opulence, with gold is involved, or gold standards, finance is involved, then lust will exist there. And of course, it is in senses, mind, intelligence. So, escape. It is all over. It's going to burn you. When I say you, means non-devotees. You are all eminent devotees. Okay, so with that, let's quickly go on to the next parts. We heard a lot about spiritualizing or intelligence, right? But how exactly should you be doing that? We don't have the details. So we want an action, a very detailed action, or at least we want some experiences from past people who've done it. And just saying do Buddhi Yoga it's a very 10,000 feet view, right? It doesn't go down detail. So let's find that out. And who else do we go to? Our recourse is we have to go to Bhagavatas, either a person Bhagavata or a book Bhagavata. In this case, we have gone to book Bhagavata, Srimad Bhagavatam Puran. And we have grabbed, so we'll not show that today, but essentially what we've done is there is in Bhagavatam a search utility, Google equivalent, and then you can come over here and search for the word kama or luster, right? And when you get the results, then you can filter them out into what is coming from Srimad Bhagavatam Purana, and then go step by step, and look at all the cantos and how many occurrences are there, and then go and figure out. So we've done something similar, and here is the what is up for pick. So first, what are the do's? So this do's is part of a set of do's and don'ts. So in this browser tabs, we're talking about the do's. And here's the first verse that we got. Yashat saptanam vijikshamano graheshu nirvishyayate purvam atyeti durgashat urjitarin shineshu kamam vichared vipaschet. What does it mean? One who is situated in household life and who automatically conquers his mind and 5 sense organs is like a king in his fortress, who conquers his powerful enemies after one is trained in household life and his lusty desires have decreased. He can move anywhere without danger. So essentially this this verse is coming from a set of topics, which is being, the occasion is that Lord Brahma is talking to King Priyavarta and about the activities of King Priyavarta. And the thing to note over here is the word yatet. Where is yatet? Yeah, must try. So the formula that is mentioned over here is you must try to live in a fort. And what is that fort? In the household life. So if you live in Varnashram system and you are regulated by the rules of Varnashram system, then you will be able to conquer this. And once you conquered it, then you can slowly get out of this household life. But before that, be in a fortress. Okay. Once you're in a fortress, then lust won't be able to attack you because the system of Varnashram Dharma will save you. Next verse. Vrittya swabhava kritaya vartamana swakarmakrit hitva swabhava jamkarma shanaya nirgunatam iyat. Translation. If one acts in his profession according to his position in the modes of nature and gradually gives up these activities, he attains nishkama stage. So lust, as you know, is kama, right, in Sanskrit. So nishkama means beyond the kama stage, right? So in the previous verse, we are talking about staying and doing activities. Here it is talked about is you do your profession, same again, Varnashram system, but you gradually give it up. Shanay. So nirgurtam. So it is about giving up shanay, slowly. And what is the occasion for this? This is where Narad Muni is talking to Yudhishthira Maharaj, and chapter 11, the perfect society. So Narad Muni is talking about what is the perfect society. This is 11th, right? Yeah, over here. The perfect society for spiritual classes, behavior of perfect ideal. So that idealism aspect is being talked over here. And this is Narad Muni talking to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Okay. And you must have inquired, what is the actual religion of a human being? Okay. Devotees, so let's go on. As you can see, everyone is doing their profession. And if they gradually give it after having spent significant time in that, then that is one way out. Next. Asankalpajayet kamam krodham kam vivarjanat arthanarthekshaya lobham bhayam tatvavamarsanat. So what is saying? By making plans with determination, one should give up lusty desires for sense gratification, right? Similarly, by giving up envy, the other ones are okay, but let's focus on the one with determination. So you have to make a plan with determination. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur suggested how to conquer lusty desires for sense gratification. One cannot give up thinking of women. So it's not really women. I mean, for a case of women, it's like men, but it's vice versa. For thinking in this way is natural. Even while walking on the street, one will see so many women. However, if one is determined not to live with a woman, even while seeing a woman, he'll not become lusty. If one is determined not to have sex, he can actually automatically conquer lusty desires. The example given is, if one is hungry, and if on a particular day he's determined to observe fasting, then he'll naturally conquer the disturbance of hunger and thirst. So basically, go with determination. So the key over here is a sankalpaj, which means you go with determination, right? And with determination, you can conquer great heights in life. Next verse. Pumso ayam samsrater hetur asantosho arthakamayo yadrachayo papannena santosho muktaye smrata. Keyword over here is santosha. Santosh means being satisfied. Translation. Material existence causes discontent in regard to fulfilling one's lusty desires. Achieving more and more. Mujhe mange more. That's bad for a Indian something. This is a cause for continuation of material life, which is full of repeated birth and death. But one who is satisfied by that which is obtained by destiny. What is the key word over here? It's a very Bhagavad style word. Yadachaya with the gift of destiny. Yada chaya, whatever you got, be having santosha. Then they are ready for liberation also, if you start getting santosh. That was also that 11th verse in chapter 12 Bhagavad Gita. So that is another key over here. If you just remain happy with what you get, don't do ugra karma, don't strive extra, then it will be okay in life, don't worry. Next one. So Upyamanam muhushetram swayam nirviryatam yat nakalpate punah sutyai uptam bijam chanashyati evam kama shayam. You see, kama, chittam, kama namati sevaya. So this is an antithesis. Virajet yatharajan agnivat kam bindubi. So what does the translation say? My dear king, if an agriculture field is cultivated again and again, the power of its production decreases, and whatever seeds are sown there are lost. Just as a drop of ghee or fuel on a fire never extinguishes the fire, but a flood of ghee will similarly, overindulgence in lusty desires mitigates such desires entirely. So it's exact opposite of the previous one. In the first verse, he said, we'll live in a fortress. Here he's saying, go, enjoy more, have more fun, do more lusty stuff. Coming from the Revered Bhagavatam, 7, 11, 33, 34. Right? So here is over-cultivated crop, and you can see hardly anything is going over here. And why is this said? This is actually meant for a different segment of society. And where are these segments of society coming from? It's coming from mental consciousness. As you know, in Vedas, it is said, human species is made of 400,000 mental consciousness. So different society, different segment. But if you go back, it actually talks over here is, the lower class. Similarly, those who are too sinful have thus been born the lower class, allowed to enjoy sinful activities fully. For thus there is a chance for these activities will become detestful for them, will give an opportunity to be purified. In other words, these people are gonna do sinful activities regardless. They will indulge in lustful activity. Might as well regulate them and tell them how to do it. So that is the key over here. Right? Next verse. So Pralapano sanirundhyat. So these are the three key terms here. Yaman manastejit kaman swanasagra nirikshana yato nisarati manakam hatam brahmat. So when the mind wanders, tatas tat upaharatya, that is the key over here. Hidi rundayat chaner buddha. So what is the upaharatya mean? Here it goes. After bringing it back. So translation is saying, while continuously staring at the tip of the nose, do these pranayama. What kind of pranayama? Breathing size? Purak, kumbhak, rechaka, controlling inhalation and exhalation. And as soon as the mind being defeated by lusty desires, drifts towards feeling of sense gratification. You're doing your Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, that brown chocolate that the other person was eating, I want that Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You bring it back. And this is what the yogis, whether it is a bhakti yogi, impersonalist, whatever type of yogi, to control the mind, that is, you slowly train them. For example, when they make a boat, they get these wood logs out, they're straight. But a straight log doesn't make a boat. You have to bend it because boats are little ovalish, right? Whatever, they have shaped. So you put that wood into water and then you put it against, it's called a vice. A vice holds it and then you tighten the screws and you start bending it a little bit and then put into water for 8-10 more hours and bring it out and then tighten it a little bit. Slowly the wood will start taking shape. So same concept over here. Basically, it is saying that with pranayama mantras, with pranayama, you will be able to do control or defeat your lusty desires. But by the way, devotees note, this is the prevention part. This is not the cure part. Pranayama helps curb senses. They are sense enjoyment, lusty desires. It doesn't cure it or conquer it. And that is why in the Ashtanga Yoga, pranayama is not the ultimate step. Samadhi is the one. Pranayama comes much earlier. Okay. Okay, next one. So this is verse 7, 433. I think this is where 7, 433. Yeah, this is Narad Muni to Yudhishthira Maharaj, and this is the Prahlad Maharaj story. So, Nodvigna Chitto Vyasaneshu Nihispraha Sruteshu Drasteshu Guneshu Avastu Drak Dantendriya Prana Sharira Dhi Sada. Dantendriya. What does Dantendriya mean? Prashanta Kamo Rahita Suro Asura. Danta means controlling the senses, and how it is being done? By controlling the living forces. So this is similar. You also, where this is about Prahlad Maharaj, and in interest of time, just jumping. He always controlled his senses and life here. Being of steady intelligence and determination, he subdued all lusty desires. So he was of steady intelligence, dhi, sthit pragya, sthit dhi. and determination. Sankalpaj. Okay, so that's Prahlad Maharaj. Next one. Adyana sarvabhutat an kamakarm karmendriyashaya mohpasho dadaschinno bhagvam stav darshanat. So as you mentioned, O super soul of all living entities, O personality of Godhead. Someone's praying to the super soul. Simply by seeing you, I've been freed from all lusty desires. So just the vision of God is good enough. Okay. By the way, it is not saying about dreams. So you can see, people do see the Lord in dreams. This is about actual physical seeing. In this case, I think this is 9:8:26. This is Kapila Muni and Amshuman. Yeah, the son of Sagar meet Lord Kapila. So the story goes like this, that Amshuman is praying to Lord Kapila Dev, who is incarnation of the Lord. And basically the king Sagar, right, Sagar Maharaj, his father died and his mother was pregnant, and the mother was prevented from sati by sage Aurava. But her co-wives of that king poisoned because they realized that because she's pregnant, then her son would be the king, as usually happens. They poisoned. So the king, the Amshuman was born. Sorry, King Sagar was born despite poisoning. So that is why his name is Sagara. Sa means with, Gara means poison. So he was born even though the poison was there. Anyway, he had two wives, Sumati and Keshni, and they were doing a big sacrifice. And there's a horse was stolen by Indra, got envious, long story. And then Sumati, so there are two wives, right? Sumati's sons went looking for the horse, and they dug a trench, and the trench is called Sagara because it went into the lower lokas, and there Kapila Muni was doing his tapasya, his incarnation, and they attacked him thinking, oh, he's the one who took them. And they were burnt by his power, yogic power. And then much later, the other wife, Keshni's grandson, Amshuman, he prayed to Kapila Muni. He also went the same route, but obviously he was more humble and more devoted. So when he prayed to Kapila Muni, he got the horse back, and that's where the started. And he also got instruction to invite Ganges, which came into Lord Shiva's head in Kailash area in Mansarovar, and then flows down to Gomukh, and all the big story over there. But the point is, in this whole process, when Amshuman saw Kapila Muni, he uttered this verse which says, just by seeing you, lusty desires someone gets freed of them. Okay, so this is the form of the Lord, and people go to temple to see it because we cannot visualize that easily at our home or whatever places we are in. Okay, next. Asya eva rajan bhavato madhudusha padar vindasya gunanuvadane ratir durapa vidnoti nestiki kamam kashayam malam antar atmana. So kamam, once again last, malam, dirt, it cleanses. Okay, Surat Kumar continued, my dear king, you already have an inclination to glorify the lotus feet of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such attachment is very difficult to achieve, but when one has attained such influential faith in the Lord, it automatically cleanses lusty desires. So previous one was by seeing the Lord. Over here, inclination to glorify the Lord. What is this called? It is called Padaravindasya, of the lotus feet. Guna anuvadane. Guna means his qualities. Anuvadane, speaking. Rati, attachment. So attachment to glorifying the lotus feet of the Lord. Madhudusha. Okay. So that will actually help get rid of one's lusty desires or lustfulness. It's beautiful feet, the Lord. Oh, I don't want to get out of this slide. Pranat Dehinam. Next one. Papa Karshanam. Tranacharanugam Sriniketanam. Fani Fanarpitam Te Padambujam. Krunu Kucheshu. Na Krandi Hrachayam. What Hrachayam means? The lust in our hearts. Translation. Your lotus feet destroy the past sins of all embodied souls. So previous one was glorifying the lotus feet. No, attachment to glorifying the lotus feet. And this one is your lotus feet itself destroys the past sins of all who surrender to them. So that means a surrendering to the lotus feet. These feet follow after the cows in the pastures. So if someone actually surrenders to the lotus feet of the Lord, which follow the pastures of cows, then their lusty desires will be. Next one. Vikriditam vrajvradubhir idam cha Vishnu Shraddhan Vito Anushunayad Athavarnayedya Bhaktim Param Bhagvati Pratilabhya Kamam Hidarogam Ashvapinahotya Achirena Dhira. Translation. Anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Lord's playful affairs with the young gopis. What is the term over here? Vikritam, sporting of Krishna with Vrajvadubi, the young woman of Vrindavan. If someone what does what? Anushranayat, hears, or Varunayat, describes, then there, thus he will quickly become sober and conquer lust. Remember spiritual intelligence? If you describe the playful affairs of Krishna and the young gopis, you will actually attain the cure, not the prevention. Here Krishna is playing Hori with all the gopis. So playful activities of Krishna. Let's go on. The Kama Karma Bijana Yasachetasi Sambhava Vasudeveka Nilaya Savai Bhagavat Tottamaha. Term to note over here is Bhagavata Uttama, first class devotee. Na of Kama, of lust, fruitive work. What does it mean? One who has taken exclusive shelter of the Supreme Lord Vasudeva becomes free from fruitive activities which are based on material lust. So the key over here is exclusive shelter. Exclusive shelter means, the terms over here, exclusive. Vasudev Ek Nilaya. So Nilaya is the term over here. If Ek means single, only, Vasudev only Nilaya. If you take the shelter of Vasudev, then you will get rid of. Like just like a paper boat floating in water can be destroyed any moment. Similarly, this human body can be destroyed any moment. However, if we take shelter of Krishna, we can go beyond this ocean of material existence. Next one. We don't have time for this. Some Prachataras Yagya Purusha. So over here, the point is that in this case, 5, 7, 6, yeah. This is Sukadev Goswami talking to Maharaj Parikshit. So it's a very big translation. But after performing the preliminaries of various sacrifices, Maharaj Bharat offered the results in the name of religion to Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva. In other words, he performed all the yagyas for the satisfaction of Lord Vasudeva Krishna. Maharaj Bharat thought that since demigods are different parts of Vasudeva's body, he controls those who are explained in the Vedic mantras. By thinking in this way, Maharaj Bharat was freed from all material contamination, such as attachment, lust, and greed. Right? So things to note over here are in this verse. 1. Devan Purush Avaya Veshu has different parts and limbs of the body of Supreme Person. So that is one thought. Right? Even though when we do these yagya sacrifice, we are doing chanting all the demigod mantras, he is not thinking that. He's thinking, he's doing that, but thinking they are the limbs of the Supreme Personality. You've got it. Other things over here. Devta Lingana Yagapurusha. He's the enjoyer of all sacrifices. And yeah. Dharma came by the name of religion, pare, into the transcendence, Brahmani. So that means even though he's offering oblations, he's thinking, para Brahmani. He's actually doing it to transcendence because transcendence ultimately rules. The Krishna is behind all the demigods, right? That's what it is. So if you have that understanding, if you know Krishna is supreme, Ekla Krishna Bhratya, Baki Sab, all of these sevak, right? Then that lust will go away. Next verse. 7:7:33. Is that 7:7:33? Yeah. So this one is between Prahlad Maharaj to his schoolmates. So let's just go on. By these activities, what activities we don't know, as mentioned above, we don't know. One is able to cut down the influence of the enemies, namely lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, jealousy. So what are these activities? If we go to the previous verse to this 33. So here's the 30 and 31. Guru Shushushaya Bhaktaya. What is Shushushaya? Means by rendering service to the bona fide spiritual master. There are many other things mentioned over here. Whatever one has in his possession should be given to spiritual master, and by in association steadily devoted persons, one should worship the Lord, hear the glories. So multiple things mentioned over here. But basically, if you follow a guru, right, like this is Srila Prabhupada in his youth, following Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, almost his first meeting over there. Then next, the other verse just before that one, or the one after that is Hari Sarveshu Bhuteshu Bhagwan Asta Ishvara. Right? So what is it saying? One should always remember the Supreme Personality Word. So if you also do that remember that the Paramatma is there, the Krishna is present in our heart as Paramatma, then too, it is possible to do what it was mentioned over here, right? By these activities. So what are these activities? One, follow Guru and follow the advice. The second one is know that Krishna exists in your heart. Sweet Jagannath is existing in our heart. Hail Krishna. Okay, next one. This is about Pingala, the prostitute. And what is mentioned over here is, as the night wore on, so one of our unlucky days, the prostitute who intensely desired money gradually became morose and her face dried up, thus being filled with anxiety for money and most disappointed. The key word over here is disappointed. She began to feel a great detachment from a situation, and happiness arose in her mind, being completely frustrated. So that is the key over here. And next verse also, the prostitute felt disgusted with her material situation, thus became indifferent to it. Indeed, detachment acts like a sword. So previous word it also mentions, she began to feel great detachment and happiness arose in her mind. So she did cross that border, right? So it's Pingala. And so basically, for whatever reason, maybe by circumstance or by self-thought, if someone gets frustrated with the material condition, that will take them out of the desire for lust. Next, or rather the crux of everything. Akama sarva kamava moksha kam udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena jajeta purusham param. What is he saying is, it doesn't matter what kind of kama or lust you have, one that is beyond all material desires. Akama, sarva kama, one with a sum total of material desire. I want this, I want that, blah, blah, blah. Va, either, or moksha kama, one who desires liberation. All of them, if they are intelligent, then what should they do? Tivrena bhakti yogena, with great force, by devotional service to Lord, Jaji should worship Purusham Param, the Supreme Lord. A person's born intelligence, whether it be full of material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. And here is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Like, this is the only good, or rather the only photograph I could get where someone's doing bhakti and with really strong effort, right? We are here, Jagannath, obviously he was not doing with effort, it looked like it. And the Jagannath chariot just stopped and no one could budge it. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just came behind and put his forehead, pushed, and the chariot started moving. So just highlighted that part. The king is watching, Pratapruddha, and everyone else is watching. And how the chariot stopped, they just couldn't figure out why the chariot stopped. So the key word over here is, you should worship the Lord, but how? With great force. Tivrena bhakti yogena. So I think I'm out of time. I have a little more stuff, but I think at this point of time it will be better if I stop. And please, dear devotees, if you have any questions, reflections, or anything to say, please do. If no one, then obviously I can zip through the other set of slides too, but I'll stop here. Please unmute yourself. Any questions, anything about kama, lust, how to stop it?
Anyone on Zoom would like to comment
Sorry, I had to go.
or ask Damodar Prabhu? Okay, so Prabhu, I would like to say that this is a very important topic you have picked up. One aspect of this lust is very much prevalent in this COVID-19. One of the aspect of that is it had increased dramatically during this time because people could not go out and engage in other types of sense gratification. So it's a very relevant topic you picked up. And the research you did is extensive, basically. I mean, you went through Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavatam, and many other things. And I think you are right that the last verse you read is, it does not matter in what situation you are, keep doing bhakti, forceful bhakti, with determination to the Lord that, he will take care someday. He will create situations and events in your life. Of course, you should also put effort to show him that you are interested, right? And then ultimately it is in his control, and he will make it happen.
Right, Prabhu. Yeah. Bhakti works. Let's put it like this. Long story short. So,
If anyone has any comments, or otherwise you can use maybe 1 minute left now. Prabhu. Anyone else has any question for Vijay Damodar Prabhu?
okay, so then maybe since we are anyway at the end of the time, I want to zip through a very small part of what is still pending. There were some, like we talked about do's, right? There were some don'ts, and why the process works, what is the test. So I don't know if I'll get chance to talk about them in future. But the most important thing is here's a little bit of a sudden turnaround. So I do want to talk about that. So let me share my screen. So the previous tabs over here talk about the other thing that I just mentioned, other don'ts that people should watch out and things like that, how to test if you're successful. But here's a very curious aspect about overcoming lust, the outcome, right? And let's just look at the result that once you do that, right? So in this case, this is talked by the gopis. When Mukunda vibrates the flute, he has placed on his lips, stopping its hold with his tender fingers. He rests his left cheek on his left arm and make his eyebrow dance. At that time, the demigoddesses traveling in the sky with their husbands, the Siddhas, become amazed. As those ladies listen, they are embarrassed to find their minds yielding to the pursuit of lusty desires. And the distress, they are unaware that the belts of their garments are losing. Here's something that we're trying to run away from. And looks like it is coming back. Okay. So here the demigoddess and demigods going around in the chariots flying. Another one. Now endowed with beauty, character, and generosity, Trivakra began to feel lusty desires for Lord Keshav. Taking hold of the end of his upper cloth, she smiled and addressed him as follows. And there's some story after that, but basically she is Kubja on with the bent back, and Krishna sees, and because she is ready to do a little service to Krishna, give some chandan and something apply to both Balaram and Krishna. Krishna makes her beautiful in a second. How does he do it? So this is where Krishna actually presses on her feet, and then her back suddenly became straight, and she was anyway beautiful, but because her body became straight, and then she suddenly is a maiden that can charm anyone, says Krishna and Balaram over there when they visited Mathura, right? So of course this photograph was taken a little before she held the upper end of Krishna's cloth. This is still a little earlier, but so once again we see over here that here's lust coming back, and we were trying to run away from it. Next verse. Many persons have attained liberation simply by thinking of Krishna with great attention, giving up sinful activities. This great attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection of devotional service or devotional service. I shall now explain how one receives Krishna's mercy simply by concentrating one's mind upon him. Looks like lusty desires are coming back and it is being recommended. Wow. Let's hear one gopi is thinking about Krishna. Right? Next one. As through devotion to the Lord, one can attain his abode. Many have attained that goal by abandoning their sinful activities and absorbing their minds in the Lord through lust, envy, fear, affection. Lust is back, very much back, and a thumping manner. Another one. My dear King Yudhishthira, the gopis by the lusty desire, Kamsa by his fear, Shishupal and other kings by envy, and Yadus by their familiar relationship with Krishna, you Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna, and we the general devotees by our devotional service have obtained the mercy of Krishna. Lusty desires are very much back. Right? Here's a gopi in lusty desires of Krishna. Thought. Smaram. This is where the last chapter of the 10th canto, where queens of Dwarka are talking about, oh Malayan breeze, what have we done to displease you, so that you stir up lust in our hearts, which have already been shattered by Govinda's sidelong glances. So lust is not only back with gopis, with the devotees, but also in the queens in the Aishwarya mode. And the one was the last or second last. How can intelligent city woman possibly trust the words of one whose heart is so unsteady? I think this is Gopi Geet part. Yeah. And who is so ungrateful. So they are cursing Krishna. They must believe him because he speaks so wonderfully, and also because his beautiful smiling glances arouse their lust. So here's one set of women talking about another set of women, and about how Krishna will arouse their lust because this sidelong glances from Krishna. So end note. We are trying to overcome lust and to get more lust. That doesn't make sense. Or does it make sense? It does. Here what we're trying to overcome, and maybe we can end with this. Does anyone want to answer this? How come we're trying to overcome lust in this entire talk today and Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, and we're just ending with more lust? Anyone, please? How can the result be to get more lust while we overcome lust? Laksha, are you there?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. End lust to get lust for Krishna, and then you can go back to him.
And that's true. But why are they both called lust?
I'm not sure, Prabhuji.
So yeah, that's okay. They are both called lust because they are lust. The only difference, one is material lust, one is spiritual lust. And as we read in the chapter 341, spiritual lust is love. So really it's the love of God that in the reflected world into this world becomes lust. Because really there's no difference between lust and love. Love means you have other side destination, and you're trying to interact, associate intimately with it, and you desire something for it and for yourself. And when that is devoid of God, it is technically called lust or material lust. When it is has Krishna centered or God centered, then it is spiritual lust, or it is called spiritual lust, right? So bottom line is, in the spiritual race, we don't have to be winners. There is no overcoming lust. You just have to be finishers. And what do you finish with? You just finish with exactly what you have here, but not in the perverted reflection, but into the true state of that activity. Anger, lust, greed, everything that we think of, universal brotherhood, all of those things that we can think of, philanthropy and altruism, nationalism, all of those things, if you become a finisher of bhakti yoga, all of them will be back, but they will be back in a thumping fashion with Krishna-centered version of them. And so you don't have to be a winner saying, I finally got rid of lust. You don't get rid of lust. Just param drishta nivartate. Pour more Krishna into your life. And when you get more Krishna in your life, the material aspect of the same things will vanish, and they will all shine with the brilliance of Jiva and Param Jiva, Krishna. That, I think we can end over here. Is that okay, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Wonderful lecture, Prabhu, and wonderful explanation of the topic. Final call. Anyone has any question, comments? If not, we'll close the session here today.
Thank you all for giving me an opportunity that we can end over here. Thanks a lot for joining today and hearing this. And please do send me your feedback, whether now or later, indirectly, directly. I'm always trying to visit the temple so we can meet there too. We can end here. Vancha Kalpatra.
Damodar Prabhu ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai, devotees ki jai, Guru Parampara ki jai, Krishna ki jai, Param Panchattva ki jai. Thank God, Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Radharani ki jai. Vancha Kalpatrubhascha Kripa Sindhuve Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Hari Hari Bol.
Very good. We'll close the session now today.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me. And Ashramada Prabhu ki jai. Thank you for helping me.
Prabhupada ki jai.